In this sixth screencast for Chapter 2, we'll look at our next family of organic molecules, the lipids. Like carbohydrates, most lipids are made from only the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're different from carbohydrates in that the ratio of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is far from 1 to 2 to 1. Lipids have much more carbon and hydrogen and very little oxygen. Unlike carbohydrates, lipids have little or no hydroxyl groups. They have very few to no polar covalent bonds. We'll look at 4 different kinds of lipids. The simplest are the fatty acids. Glycerides and phospholipids are made from fatty acids. And the final group, the steroids, are sometimes called non-fatty acid lipids because they're not synthesized simply by adding fatty acids to some other molecule. Let's start with the fatty acids. They're called acids because they have an acidic carboxyl group, COOH, at one end of the molecule. The rest of the molecule is composed of only carbons and hydrogens. This part is called a hydrocarbon chain. Remember, the carbon to carbon and carbon to hydrogen bonds are all nonpolar covalent bonds. More specifically, the fatty acid pictured here is a saturated fatty acid. By saturated, chemists mean that every carbon atom in the hydrocarbon chain has at least 2 or more hydrogens bonded to it. Saturated fatty acids have a hydrocarbon chain that is straight. These straight molecules stack tightly together. This facilitates them being a solid at room temperature. Saturated fatty acids are common in animal fats. The second fatty acid is unsaturated. What this means is that 2 or more of the carbon atoms have only 1 hydrogen atom bonded to them. They have only 1 hydrogen because the carbons are double covalently bonded to each other. In addition to reducing the number of hydrogens present, the carbon-to-carbon double bonds put a bend in the molecule, changing its shape. Because of the bent hydrocarbon chain, unsaturated fatty acids don't stack easily together, and as a result they tend to be liquid at room temperature. They're commonly found in vegetable oils. Trans fats are partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. Processed foods often use partially hydrogenated vegetable oils because they're more stable. Glycerides are lipids that are made from glycerol and 1, 2, or 3 fatty acids. Monoglycerides contain 1 fatty acid, diglycerides have 2, triglycerides have 3 fatty acids. Let's look at how they're synthesized and also how they're broken apart during digestion. In the green box is glycerol. Using condensation synthesis, the same kind of reaction we use to make polysaccharides, 1, 2, or 3 fatty acids can be bonded to the glycerol. A molecule of water is released when each fatty acid is attached. Hydrolysis of glycerides is also possible. This occurs during the digestion of glycerides. The making of lye soap is another example of hydrolysis of glycerides. Your great-great-grandmother may have taken animal lard, which is rich in triglycerides, heated it in a large kettle with water and lye to make soap. She was hydrolyzing fatty acids from the lard. Earlier, I emphasized that the hydrocarbon chain, forming the bulk of the fatty acid molecule, is strongly hydrophobic. But there is 1 polar covalent bond between the oxygen and hydrogen atoms in the carboxyl group. This part of the molecule will form hydrogen bonds with water, and therefore is hydrophilic. Emulsifiers, like soap, allow water and lipids to mix because the fatty acids mix well with both substances. The hydrocarbon chain mixes well with the lipids, and the OH on the carboxyl group attaches to water molecules. A third type of lipid is the phospholipids. Earlier I said most lipids contain only carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. I couldn't say all because of the phospholipids. They contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus, as well as some other elements. Much of the phospholipid molecule is a diglyceride. It contains only carbon and hydrogen, very little oxygen, and is strongly hydrophobic. However, at the other end of the molecule is the phosphate group with something else attached to it. When chemists want to indicate that something else is present, and they don't want to specify exactly what it is, they use the abbreviation R. The phosphate containing end of the phospholipids is strongly hydrophilic. Phospholipids are important because they form the basic structure of all cell membranes. This picture, similar to one in your text, gives the basic structure of phospholipids. Highlighted in red is the hydrophilic phosphate containing into the molecule. The yellow is the hydrophobic fatty acids. It's the interaction between these phospholipids and water that results in the phospholipid bilayer that is the basic structure of all cell membranes. The last type of lipid we'll discuss are steroids. They're sometimes referred to as non-fatty acid lipids because they're not made by simply attaching fatty acids to something. Like other lipids, they contain lots of carbon and hydrogen and very little oxygen. They're hydrophobic, like other lipids. Cholesterol is a steroid which you've probably heard the most about. While too much can cause health problems, cholesterol is absolutely necessary as a component of animal cell membranes and also as a precursor to the sex hormones estrogen and testosterone. In this diagram you can see the similarity between cholesterol and testosterone. This ends the screencast over lipids. In the last screencast we'll look at proteins and nucleic acids.